It's a discussion.
What'd you say?
You need 2 more in the room for the forum.
I tried.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. Meeting of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Technical Advisory Committee, November 16th, 9:30 a.m. There is not a quorum, so it looks like this meeting's information only,
Maybe we can still go around the room.
but I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Bruce Thomas from Toolkit. And you are?
Tracy Whitehead, MTA Cart. Suzanne Neighbor, staff of the commission.
Anthony Summers, staff commission.
David Hilton, staff of the commission.
Nate Miller, staff.
Brendan McDowell, City of Manchester Planning.
Adam Lasney, staff.
Linda Kuhnhart, Francistown. And Sylvia Von Ola with the commission. Then we have our online folks.
Lucy,
Lucy St. Chad, New Hampshire DOT. Good morning, everyone.
Kristen,
Hi, Kristen Clark, City of Manchester, Department of Public Works.
Tammy,
Tammy Zamoyski, staff of the commission.
and Cam.
He's helping somebody at the door right now.
Okay, and Mark.
There we go. There we go. Mark Sunan, Town of New Boston.
All right, well, welcome, everybody. Looks like we can't take action on the minutes on September 21st and October 19th because of no quorum. So new business, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission fiscal year 2003 to 2026 tip amendment number 3.
Okay.
Nate Miller.
Oh, sorry, Nate. There you go. Take that.
Okay. All right, how about this? Can everybody see full screen online?
Yes.
Yep.
I don't have a lot of slides anyway, so as it relates to tip amendment number 3, if you recall, I did walk through in some detail, some might call it excruciating detail, last month about each of the project changes in tip amendment number 3. We did release subsequent to that meeting the full tip amendment number 3 on November 6th. We had we're in our 10-day comment period right now. The actual tip amendment was included in your meeting packet for this meeting. The public comment period runs until tomorrow, Friday, November 17th. So far, we have received 1 comment from New Hampshire DOT, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. It's related to their statewide training program. And we will have a public hearing to consider adoption of tip amendment number 3 on November 28th. It's a Tuesday morning. Our MPO meets Tuesday morning, November 28th at 11:30. So what is the comment that we received from New Hampshire DOT? It relates to a statewide program called the training program. They are proposing to add additional funding to this program for fiscal year 24 through 26. They need this supplemental funding for their workforce development needs, and they do have we do have available surface transportation block grant funding, what we call STBG funding, to support this additional funding that they're proposing in the training program. So there won't be any issue with fiscal constraint, although there will be a new fiscal constraint analysis that reflects this additional funding in the final version of tip amendment number 3. So we do recommend incorporating and adopting this project change as part of tip amendment number 3, and we will make that recommendation on Tuesday at the public hearing to our MPO. So with that, well, this computer is giving me a hard time today. With that, I have all the slides for all the other project changes. I can go through all of those again if anybody really wants me to. But at this point, if there are any questions, we can't take a formal action because we don't have a quorum in the room to recommend the MPO adopt this, but certainly we can tell our MPO members that it was the consensus of those TAC members present that they should adopt tip amendment number 3 at the public hearing on November 28th. So I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Could I just ask, what's the training for?
I think there are some workforce development goals that are identified in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for state DOTs. My understanding is the Federal Highway Administration may have made a few recommendations to DOT. I don't have all of the details about that. So part of this supplemental funding, I think, is responding to some Federal Highway Administration recommendations, but beyond that, they're dealing with the same issues that we all are in terms of being able to hire and retain a qualified workforce. And so they're needing to develop skills.
I'd just like to know that they're actually training people, things that we need, skill sets that we could use rather than how to be polite to each other.
I think these are skills related to, you know, the functions of a Department of Transportation.
That's what I don't have a problem funding that.
Lucy, do you
Although
have any
being
thoughts
polite is
or
nice.
from a DOT perspective on the training program and what it will entail and why it's needed?
Nate, I think you summed it up. I don't have any additional details to share on that, but obviously, as you talked about, you know, retaining a workforce and giving the proper training that they need is, you know, what everybody wants to do. So.
Lucy, it looks like you have a plane coming out of your right ear.
That's my background. It's got freight things.
Wow. Looks painful. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I could go for a consensus vote if that's what you'd like to do.
We have a
Can we see maybe,
motion to support.
we can't do a motion.
Can't do a formal motion, but does anybody not support the adoption of tip amendment number 3? Maybe we can.
We have a consensus to support that.
Yeah.
Thumbs up for people online, maybe. Thank you,
Okay.
thank you, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. That's all I had today.
All right.
Next on the agenda, Climate Action Toolkit, Roadway Adaptations, Southern Hampshire Planning.
Gonna join me too.
Oh, here,
Right,
That's what-
we are.
sorry.
All right. Do you actually, do you mind directing that towards me?
Well, no, I can't. I'm not gonna do that.
Oh, no, oh, we can't move it.
Well,
We're not allowed to move it. Okay.
Well, we
Just,
can try.
I don't want to mess anything up.
We'll have to, I can't see where you
Yeah.
are.
Both can't do that.
Oh,
at
wait,
the
we
same
can't,
time.
okay, we can't do it at the same time.
All right. There you go.
Okay, are we okay?
Let's see if that's close to where you are.
You gotta,
I gotta escape from here.
no, you just have to make it full, on the talking SNHPC, you gotta make that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that's Lucy.
Are we talking?
Why are we not showing up? I don't know.
Okay.
That's good enough, okay.
Yeah.
And then I can pop this into full screen. Okay. Tammy, can you see that in full screen?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay.
Go ahead and hide.
Oh, yes. Now I can hide all the people. Great. All right. Good morning, everybody. Zach and I are going to talk a little bit about the Climate Action Toolkit that is now imminent. You all have heard me talk about the climate planning work we've been doing over the past year. It's been really fun and amazing learning experience. We have a toolkit that is almost ready to put out. It is sitting on top of Sylvia's tippy top of her review pile. So we're going to be crossing some T's, dotting some I's, and really getting this out as soon as we can. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to share with this group because we love your input on thinking about how to disseminate it, who to get the word out to, which components would be most helpful to the folks in your community to really dig into further, because we're happy to do a little bit of a showcase. We're really excited about this resource, and we hope it's going to make a big difference for how we think about resiliency and planning in our region. So we're gonna go over, we're gonna do a high level overview of the contents of this toolkit. Some of this will be really familiar to you, so I won't go into so much detail on certain chapters, but I will note that the chapters we're gonna highlight today in a little more depth, we haven't talked about yet, you know, and one is the technical analysis that Zach has been working on and has done some really excellent work to examine corridor level vulnerability concerns around the region. And then I'll also do a little bit of a deeper dive into chapter 4, which is adaptation in action, like really thinking about how do we take all the learnings of this toolkit and put them to use. But to start, you know, the toolkit opens with a nice introduction that really describes all of the different inputs that went into this. As we discussed, there's a 2020 vulnerability assessment that formed like a really essential foundation for this work. We've done extensive kind of literature review and outreach to other regional planning commissions that have been exploring kind of climate change initiatives for quite some time. We had a fantastic workshop in April and got some stakeholder insights that have been really important for creating this toolkit. And then we also have Zach's corridor analysis. Chapter 1 looks at the climate data, right? So we are pulling from all of the work, you've probably seen some of these charts before, but looking at, you know, global trends in climate change, right? We know that there's a higher emission scenario and lower emission scenario in terms of where we're headed and in terms of the increasing temperatures across our globe. We also know that as temperatures rise, the atmosphere holds more water, and increases in precipitation are going to be really quite a big deal. And as you can see, the Northeast is particularly impacted by this increase in precipitation. And we're also looking at, you know, what are the impacts of greatest concern in our region, and really where we are. Inland flooding is far and away our biggest climate threat. We're going to have greater frequency of very heavy rainfall events, much higher risk of flooding, and infrastructure vulnerability concerns. And in the course of developing this toolkit, just in July, this is a still shot from Lane Road in Chester. So there was a washout, there was a heavy rain, a beaver dam collapsed, and unexpectedly this road completely washed out. So, you know, there's no question that this is kind of top of mind for a lot of communities in our region, this vulnerability of our roadway infrastructure. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zach to really dig into chapter 2. He's done some fantastic work on the analysis of the corridor scale.
Okay, thank you. So for the unit that we looked at in this particular study was federal aid eligible roads. And we did that because those are the roads that we can really spend any money on. And so we want to focus on those. In our region, there's about 1,200 Fed aid eligible lane miles. And not every route in our region is federal aid eligible. If you look at Francistown, New Boston, and Ware, as well as a couple of, yes, just those three, you see like routes 47, 149. Those are state routes, but they are not eligible for federal funding because of their functional classification. There are 530 national highway lane miles. 330 of that is interstate, freeway, or expressway, but you can see that the majority of there, 870 of it, is other arterials and collectors. And so that's the stuff that we really have an influence on. There's also, weirdly, two lane miles of local roads, which are part of the national highway system, in Londonderry around some freight ports. And I'm not really sure how that ended up there, but that's the way it happened. And this we want to focus on, like we did before, stream crossings, steeps, but we want to expand it to other hazards that we could look at, including steep slopes and flood prone areas outside of the stream crossings. And we also wanted to take a corridor approach as before we just looked at individual stream crossings one by one. So for that, we want to update the scoring rubric that we used for the stream crossing for the vulnerability assessment, which is now, you know, we adopted in 2020, but we started on it much earlier. So it feels like a lifetime ago. And in that, we looked at 5 main components: traffic volume and AADT, structural condition, 10-year hydraulic vulnerability, geomorphic compatibility. If you don't know what those two are, don't worry, I'm going to explain that more so in a minute. And then flooding. And before we scored all sorts of things differently based on how important we thought they were. So volume was higher versus this particular criteria. And this one, we just said, okay, we're going to take agnostic view on this, and just everything, the max, one of these gets 5 points. If you score the highest, you get 5 points for these. Another key component for this is we did not do outreach with local road agents in DPW like we did in the first time. James went out and sat down with road agents to say, here's a map, point to me your trouble areas. So this time, this is just coming from data from third-party sources, none that we sourced from the towns themselves. And you can see that, the way this works is, for ADT, the highest scoring route gets 5 and the lowest gets 0, or you get that proportional to that. Red list bridges and those in poor condition get a 5, those in good condition get 0. For the vulnerability, those who fail get a 5, those who are vulnerable get a 4, unknown gets 2, pass or non-applicable get a 0. And then we have, again, for fully incompatible, for geomorphic compatibility gets a 5, fully compatible gets a 0. For flooding, flood zone, FEMA floodway gets a 5. Anything else in the 1% annual chance flood zone or in a hazard mitigation plan identified flood hazard gets a 4. And then anything in the 0.2 annual chance flood zone gets a 3, and anything below that gets a 0. So what do I mean when I talk about geomorphic compatibility? So we have 2 examples here of hydraulic vulnerability and geomorphic compatibility. The one on the left is a little better visualization, and you can thank DES for these. You can see that, for the culvert, those pass if it's not getting above the culvert, it passes. That yellow area, it's getting above the culvert, but it doesn't overtop the road. That's vulnerable. And then that red area at the top where it has failed and now the water is running over the top of the road, that would be considered a failure. Geomorphic compatibility is described as the long-term compatibility of a stream crossing with the river channel form and the sediment transport. So how well does the culvert match the actual flow in terms of direction and its tilt and of a particular stream? Because the more it doesn't match, the more likely it's going to fail. In total, we have 364 stream crossings scored in our region that are on federal aid roads. National bridge inventory bridges, which are those that are 20 feet or more, were excluded unless they failed the vulnerable 100-year hydraulic vulnerability. The reason for that is previously what you would do is you'd have bridges pulled in like Bridge Street the Bridge Street Bridge has a high amount of traffic on it, so it would score very high. But if the Bridge Street Bridge is flooding,
That's a problem.
Get your ARC. If you're not on your ARC already, we are in much bigger problems. We don't want to look at those bridges. We want to look at those that are actually going to fail during a 100-year flood. So the top score was 25. The total score that you could score is 25. And you see we have a distribution of stream crossings here on the left. That's the histogram where the less vulnerable, those scoring 0 to 2 are on the left, and those most vulnerable scoring up to around 20 are on the right. You see that most of them are in the middle, kind of around that 7, 8, 7, 8, and 9 score there. So our highest scoring was Parameter Road at Londonderry, which is not a federal aid eligible road, but is within 200 feet of one. It's right at the end. It's like the culvert is right at the intersection. So if it did fail, it would cause serious problems for 102.
Is that Perimeter Road or?
It's Parameter. We just looked it up because we
thought it was a spelling
I was
error.
like, is that a spelling error? No, that's the name of the road.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that word, but that's apparently a word. The second highest was High Street in Derry, which is actually the section there that's going to be replaced as part of exit 4A. And then the third scoring was actually at Raymond Road 107 in Deerfield. So weren't these, this wasn't this wasn't weighted heavily towards urban areas. A lot of them happen to be in smaller communities like Deerfield. Now, there's a lot going on here. I'm not expecting to look at all. This is just a demonstration of what will be in the plan. There are tons and tons of tables like this. They break it down by town, by ownership, all that sort of thing. And so here are the top 20 highest scoring stream crossings region-wide. We have things like the SAID's ID, the town, the facility, the route, the address, the latitude and longitude, whether it's actually on the federal aid eligible road or if it's just within that 200-foot buffer, ownership, and the total score. And those who are, love to count might find out that there's actually 22 on this list here. You'll see, because 2 of those are ones we are pretty questionable whether you would actually want to include them. The first is that one that in blue there, which is that North High Street in Derry, which is part of a project which is already underway. That's whatever's there now is not going to be there a couple of years from now, hopefully. The other is one that's on a railroad crossing that interacts with I-293. What happens is this analysis does not understand altitude. It doesn't understand elevation because our GIS data is not good enough that we have an elevation. So what we have here is a railroad crossing that's down here and a highway that's over here. And these two are interacting even though it's 50 feet between them. And so for stuff like that, we went and highlighted it and say like, hey, this is one that's scored, but in real life, this shouldn't have actually been scored. And so we make note of that as well. And that's just a limitation of our GIS data. I wish we had a Z dimension for most of that, but we have it for very few things. Here's an example of one of the crossings. So here's SAID's ID 102.48, and this is one of Bruce's problems here. I guess that he's going to have to deal with. This is right north of exit 10 on West River Road, New Hampshire 3A. You can see that its ADT is fairly high. And then the structural condition is generally it's fair. It's not in bad condition, but it will overtop on a 10-year flood. So it has a 1% chance. It has a 10% chance. Wait, think about that. I'm trying to convert it into annual chance.
Oh, it's a chance per year.
Yeah, but you can't do that on the fly.
Okay. You'll get it next time.
I'll do it next time. The
Yeah.
GMO compatibility is, it's partially compatible, so it's not terrible alignment, but it's not perfect. And then it's in the flood zone. So this one scored a 15.8 out of a possible 25. So it's not, the highest scoring, but it is up there.
Where's the actual problem?
Hmm?
Where is he? Is it where that dot is?
Yeah, so that yellow,
culvert.
according to the SAID's data, there's a culvert that goes under. I think there's a couple of businesses, so down here is like the Target and whatnot. And then up here, you start to get some businesses that are up by the highway. I'm trying to remember what's up there. And then there's a road crossing right here. So it's whatever that crossing is, not Hackett, a different one. Yeah. But this will be stuff like this will be in the actual plan, and you'll have the latitude and longitude. So you'll be able to identify some of the things. And this is all coming from the SAID's data. So it could be that it's out of date, that it's wrong. And if that's the case, please let us know so we can let Chris Dowd at New Hampshire UNH know that so he can update it for the SAID's data. Okay, but we want to look at actual corridors and not just individual roads or individual culverts this time. So we came up with 2 different criteria. One is the stream crossing density, and that's just the number of stream crossings divided by the linear miles. How much road do you have, and on that road, how many stream crossings do you have? But you could also you could hypothetically have fewer stream crossings, but have all of them be in terrible condition. So that's what the second one is trying to capture, the aggregate stream crossing vulnerability. That's just for all the stream crossings on that stretch of road, what's the total score for all those divided by the linear miles? So one is looking at, just the density, and one's looking at the quality of the stream crossings that are there. And if we look at, the routes themselves, we can see that, the stream crossing density is on the left, aggregate stream crossing vulnerabilities on the right. These have each been rescaled. So whatever the highest is for any of these, it gets 100. So just remember that all these have been rescaled for, top is 100 for each of these little groupings. So the highest scoring over here is the FE Everett Turnpike, same as over here. And then we have some, the 111, 101, both the expressway and the non-expressway route, but which score high. Then we have some other ones like 102, 136 that are also scoring high. And then, 102 scores high for both, which means you probably have, it's a road that you'd want to, look at a higher, would take more detail, take more time to look at. Now, you also might say, well, this is looking at, Route 3A. Well, Route 3A is a long road. This doesn't really help me. What's it look like in my community? Well, we broke it out into the routes, into the individual towns. So here we have all the non-expressways, and we looking at the aggregate stream crossing. And so, we have the different routes here, and then the towns that it is in. And the highest by far we see is 114 in Bedford, is way higher than all the others. And if you're familiar with that, that's that stretch of road has a stream that kind of crisscrosses it a number of times. And they just had to replace the big culvert right at the 101, 114 Boynton intersection. But there are a bunch of other ones up that whole way. And then some other ones, 28A and Hooksett is scoring, 28 in Wyndham. But really, in this case, this is an example where Bedford really stands out. 114 in Bedford really stands out as a potential problem area. As we mentioned, we want to look at just more than just the stream crossings. So we also want to look at flooding. So here is, all the different roads that interact with a flood zone, whether that's a FEMA or a flood hazard that's highlighted in a local hazard mitigation plan. So everything there in red is a road that interacts. Again, we have the same problem that we don't know anything about elevation. So you could have an instance where a road is, it's within 200 feet of it, but it's on a hillside, 100 feet up, or it's on a bridge, 100 feet up going across it. It's going to be flagged for this. There's not really a lot we can do about that because, again, we don't know the elevation of the roadway. But in that really rough measure, we have 130 linear miles and 270 lane miles within 200 feet of a FEMA flood zone or a flood hazard. And similarly, like we did before, we broke it out into by percentages of that area for that road, by route, by town. And this is, again, non-expressway, so we can see things like New Boston is scoring the highest. Route 13 in New Boston, 42% of the area within 200 feet of that road is in a flood zone. And if you know that road at all, that makes perfect sense because it literally goes along the river. And for that fact, it's actually a really pretty scenic drive. You go there, you have farms on one side and you have the river on the other. Some other higher scoring ones, we have 3A and Hooksett. Again, it goes along a river. That's not surprising. And Bedford comes up again, 28 in Wyndham. There are some ones that you also want to be kind of cautious of. Where's 28A? 28A in Hooksett scores really high here. And that has to do from the way the hazard mitigation plan did. When that was done, they just highlighted the entire road and said this whole road is a flood hazard. So there are some unique peculiarities that have to do with how the individual hazard mitigation plans were done. So keep that in mind. And as I said, we also want to look at steep slopes. Steep slopes are not, as big of a problem in our region as they are in other parts of the state and other parts of the country, but there are some issues with them. Here's an example of one. Here's the new rock cut, well, newish rock cut of 111 there in Wyndham. And I believe Cam's not in the room to nod at me, but I believe that is a hazard that that we're updating their hazard mitigation plan and one that the team is interested in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Confirmed.
Okay, confirmed. Again, for this, we have all the routes by their entire length, and we have the percentage for this within 200 feet that's over 25% rise. And here Route 3A scores really high, which is not surprising because if you know anything about 3A, it's got it slants down into the river on one side and it's got a hillside on the other side. So it's gonna score really high. The expressways also score high, and you have to keep that in mind because they have been altered to make them flat, which means there's been a lot of earthwork around them, which means there's a lot of steep slopes that are perhaps and not ones that we actually need to worry about because they have been engineered. They're being well monitored. So we probably want to exclude the expressways and concentrate on the smaller arterials. Here's how it breaks out again. We're looking at rise over run, over 25% by municipality, by route, non-expressways. Again, Hooksett 3A highlights 20, so about a quarter of the area within 200 feet of 3A and Hooksett is over 25 rise over run. Some other ones that are higher that are around, over, well, let's say over 10%. Wyndham here is 111. That's the one we were just looking at with that rock cut. Some of these, as you get west into the western part of our region, you start to see more terrain. So places like Ware, Francistown, New Boston are going to have more issues with steep slopes than some of our eastern Canadas. So, okay, now let's look at this at a corridor level. I'm going to pick on New Boston Route 13 here. You notice, here's an example of, looking at it, the aggregate stream crossings, 13 out of 100. So it's actually, when it comes to stream crossings, it doesn't have that many. It has some. A lot of them are bridges, as opposed to culverts, but they're there. The flooding vulnerability, though, was the highest in our region at 42%. 42% of that area is in the flood zone. Excuse me. And for steep slope, it also has a moderate risk. It's not the highest, but it is higher than that 10% that we kind of see as a threshold. Okay, well, what do we do about that? Well, it happens to be that there are projects on the line. So in this case, there's the stream crossing here on Route 13 in New Boston. It's SAID's ID 807, and it's got all these different different qualities. You can see the flood hazard. It's in the floodway because it's a bridge. It's over the river, and there is a project in the 10-year plan. I can't remember what year it's coming down the line. But 729, which is a culvert replacement for Red List Bridge carrying over 13 over the Coke. I don't know. That was Cochrane Bridge. Now, I'm going to correct myself. This one is not actually a bridge over the river. This is a culvert that feeds into the river.
Oh.
Okay, and I believe.
Oh, wow. So that was a lot. Maybe
Yeah.
take a pause.
And are there any questions? Sylvia, yes.
The table you had early on about the top 20
Yeah.
/22.
Mhm.
I wonder if you can make this so that, the score isn't how you order it, but by communities, so that the communities can have their projects together.
So in the appendix, there will be separate tables for the
each
different communities
community.
where I've said, hey, here are your top 10.
Okay,
And here are your top 10 that you actually own and have any control over.
okay, great.
And so all those will be, there will be, too many tables, one could say, in the actual, but you will be able to.
Some
So,
people seeing them.
Yeah.
but if you're only interested in your community, which fair enough.
Yeah.
You will be able to pull that up and see who your worst offenders are.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Can you, I'm hung up on the steep slope part. Like, I understand about steep slopes, but what are we worried about in relation to the roads that drop? The road is here, and we're worried about this steep slope, or the road is here, and we're worried about this steep slope?
Both.
Both. Because
In a major precipitation event, or if there's flooding, you can have a washout that's cut, like you can wash down from the steep slope to cover the roadway, or you could wash down that would take away part of the roadway.
Okay,
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of that in our state and our region, in part due to our geography, part due to our geology.
Mhm.
Like there are other parts, spent a long time in central Appalachia, and that's a much bigger problem
Mhm.
there because the steeps and the type of soil. The slope like this, probably, that slope is not going to come down because of a rain event.
Right.
What's going to happen there is you're going to have freeze and thaw and over years, and then one year you're going to have a big rock roll out. So it does depend on the particular location.
So there's more to talk about. We're the feature film today. I'll keep going. I want to move on to talk a little bit about what's in chapter 3. So, Zach does an amazing job of like teasing out all of the data and understanding what all of these different types of vulnerabilities are, that we then want to bring some solutions to the table. So chapter 3 outlines a menu of different strategies to support roadway adaptation. You all have seen a lot of this before because we've been talking about this since the April workshop when we kind of first brought this around and got feedback on it. So I'll do a pretty high level review, but one of the things we are putting together and that's part of this toolkit is kind of a tear sheet handy checklist. So for each strategy, you're going to have an understanding of like what scale we're talking about, whether it's specific site level, whether it's corridor wide, whether we're talking about systems change. And we'll have some examples of how that strategy might be implemented. The idea is that, every community is dealing with their unique context. No one's going to be able to check everything off the list for a particular concern, but everybody probably can do something. So like really providing this range of opportunity for how to start to get engaged with climate adaptation and addressing our risks with our roadways. So big picture, again, I want to keep this high level because we covered it before. But some design and engineering strategies that we're talking about have to do with retrofitting our most vulnerable stream crossings, for example. Really thinking about bringing climate data into the picture and understanding, well, what is the real lifespan of this asset, given this increase in precipitation that we're anticipating due to climate change. And then ultimately, ideally updating our roadway design standards altogether to be kind of in lockstep with the changes in our climate data, making sure that we have kind of climate ready roadway design standards that are applied universally. Nature-based solutions. I think the last time we talked about this, it was called environmental approaches. And after some kind of insight and guidance from actually our keynote speaker at the conference, Eva Burke from Federal Highway Administration, so she recommended that we kind of change our phrasing to nature-based solutions. It's actually kind of the most commonly used vernacular for a lot of the federal funding in this area as well. So we changed this title. And another thing that we added, so there's a new strategy on this list. We talked about preserving wetlands and floodplains. We also added improving river and stream environments, specifically looking at those in terms of maybe renaturalizing riverbeds, making sure we have kind of vegetative buffers that help prevent erosion, being attentive to kind of maybe a kind of infrastructure buffer zones, so we're not building too close to our river and stream beds. We also are looking at a variety of ways to enhance stormwater management with low impact development, and that's with public sites, private property as well. And then also updating in general vegetation control practices. How are we dealing with invasive species? How are we maybe integrating more flood resistant species where we need to? Operations and maintenance is another big theme we talk about. And really it's the challenge of like really optimizing our approaches given the changing scenario. The past is no longer a predictor of what the future will bring. We need to look to like a kind of escalating precipitation and perhaps shorter lifespans for some of the assets that we have in place. We also need to look at seasonal maintenance programs in response to climate change, right? If we're expecting kind of warmer, wetter springs, for example, does that mean we need to like spend less attention on, the kind of the snow clearing and more attention on culvert clearing? So there's a lot to think about on that respect. And then it's establishing flexible and responsive maintenance capabilities, whether that's about stockpiling materials, having kind of on-demand contracts in place. So if there's a climate emergency, you have people like at the ready, maybe about tracking our budget and cost codes so that we actually understand what is the implication of kind of how climate is impacting our local budgets. The next section is on outreach and collaboration. So here we're talking about staff training and knowledge sharing, keeping everyone abreast of climate priorities and all the things all the moving parts that are kind of impacting our understanding. Increasing public awareness of climate related risks to infrastructure, that came out as a really kind of dominant focus. And then strengthening multi-sector partnerships and collaboration. And we have an example here of the Coastal Adaptation Work Group. They're doing great work on the seacoast. We can kind of model potential opportunities like that, like really bringing a diverse set of stakeholders together to and really focus on climate change as a singular priority that we can collaborate on. And then the last section looks at data planning and policy issues. You know, how do we keep our inventory of vulnerable assets as up to date as possible? How can we make sure that climate priorities are effectively incorporated into all our plans and policies, whether that's transportation planning, whether that's, you know, local master plans or capital improvement plans, like just really making sure that this is kind of rising to the surface in people's minds for all of their like planning for their future. And then, you know, making sure we're impacting ongoing decision making. This is just a nice dashboard from the New Hampshire Stream Crossing Initiative, where they really are trying to systematically document the status of all stream crossings across the state. So it's just a handy resource to reflect on as well. All right, and then chapter 4. So, you know, I think with the work that Zach did for chapter 2, we have a lot of data at our fingertips. With chapter 3, we have a lot of great ideas to play with. And then with chapter 4, we wanted to dig in more in terms of like, well, what does that mean for a particular community or a particular corridor when we think about implementation? And I don't know if Andrew Haddock has perhaps joined online. If not, that, you know, he can't tell me I'm wrong about anything, but I want to give him a shout out because he did an amazing job of kind of raising his hand, volunteering the town of Chester as a place that we could workshop some of these ideas with. So we sat down with Andrew, with representatives from police, from fire, and from the highway department. And we were like, let's do a workshop. Let's sit down for 90 minutes and take a look at New Hampshire 102, which is an important east-west corridor in our region. Chester is very aware of flooding concerns, particularly since the Mother's Day flood. I think at that event, you know, 5 out of 8 of their routes out of town became impassable. So they're very cognizant of the crucial urgency of addressing flooding issues. So we brought, you know, Zach brought his Chester tables over to, we brought him over to the town offices. We sat down and we looked at the map and we really talked about, well, here's what we have and here's the information we have. Now let's talk about what your flooding priorities are. And a few that came to mind, they highlighted kind of some top 3, some that were very expected and some that were less so. One that's very expected was, you know, this is right at the Raymond town line. There are actually 2 red list bridges crossing the Exeter River right in very close proximity to each other. The one in Chester, I think, is over Hanson Road. The town is clued in. They are working on the engineering for upgrading that bridge. They're on point. The dot that's labeled with a B is a state red list bridge in Raymond. And there was less awareness about the status of that one. Another priority site was right at the Derry town line. And this is an area where let's see, I think there is an undersized culvert nearby. There is also a privately owned dam nearby that is slated for repair or removal. So again, you have this issue of like, who's controlling the situation? The town does not have full control over what's taking place there, but it's a really important critical area. And that actually is a part of 102 that was impassable during the Mother's Day flood. So it's definitely on their mind. And then a third flooding priority area that, you know, it didn't come out in terms of like a high risk stream crossing, but it's a flood prone area. And this is near Edwards Mill Road. It's one of the most important wetlands areas in the town of Chester. And it's just it's something that they're always keeping an eye on because they do see a lot of risk, if not on 102, on a lot of the roads that are intersecting with it are very nearby that could eventually impact 102. So it was really helpful to kind of do this workshop with them. And it gave us some really important takeaways to think about as we talk about kind of regional planning and, you know, some of the things that we need to be doing together. One thing that came out loud and clear is that this corridor scale analysis is very valuable for calling attention to the cascading flood impacts across property and town lines, right? And it's great to get super concentrated data on a single site, but when we start to think much more holistically, we're seeing, oh, a lot of these challenges are happening, you know, right at a town line, or like they're intersecting municipal boundaries. What it's telling us is that there's a lot more we can do to scale, like, you know, kind of basically zoom out our level of effort and work regionally and statewide to start to develop those climate ready standards that everyone's applying uniformly. And it also means that we can do perhaps some more work Zach, if you can dig in even deeper on some analysis and think about, what are these other like local roads and how do we kind of assess beyond the Fed aid spectrum. Another really fun takeaway, we talked for about 45 minutes about beavers. It's a really big topic. I was like, we could do a whole podcast series on this. And I think that what came out loud and clear is that it's really essential to identify some symbiotic solutions to address tensions between human development and wildlife, right? Like people are, like the beavers are busy. Like basically the town was like, we cannot keep up. There's a reason why that's a phrase, that's an idiom, right? Like basically, people are working so hard to keep culverts clear and the beavers are rebuilding and crowding them up just as quickly as they can. You saw the image earlier with the Lane Road washout. That was a great way for us to kind of talk to Andrew about, well, what happened there? What were the cost implications? What came out of that? That was an emergency repair situation. They could not pony up like the $750,000 plus to upgrade that road on the fly. So they basically just had to replace it without increasing resiliency. But that also helped start a conversation in town. They now have a task force that's identifying all the beaver impoundments. They're actually going to be monitoring those as well. And they're working with a consultant and they're going to be installing beaver deceivers, which I'm learning about that technology, but it's a relatively cost-effective way to make sure you're keeping the water levels even. The beavers can keep doing their work, but the water is able to flow through. So like they've actually found some great kind of nature-based solution workarounds to kind of live copacetically with these beavers that are very active in the area. And then lastly, we talked a lot about staffing shortages. Like I was amazed we got everybody around the table for that afternoon because literally everybody there was doing about 4 jobs, right? It's a real concern for a lot of communities in our region. New Hampshire, across the board, everybody's feeling it. So staffing shortages are impacting our climate readiness. Like they can't, like our road agent who was at the table was like, when there's a storm coming, I cannot clear the culverts fast enough. And what we talked about is the importance of public engagement in that respect, right? Like we need people to be fully aware of how they can support these issues and how they can actually take responsibility for maybe keeping their own driveway culverts clear. So there's a lot we can do with like thinking about that monitoring component, thinking about volunteer components. This is an image from, I don't know how to make that go away with ease, but this is from I think this is in Swansea, New Hampshire, where basically after they upgraded the culvert, they had a volunteer group of community members plant vegetation to help like reinforce the riverbed, right? So thinking about like, what can we do with limited staffing resources, because this is a very important issue. Lastly, a couple other notes just to tell you more about what's in the chapter. We talk about life cycle and cost considerations. Where in the life cycle of an asset can we start to apply kind of adaptation focused strategies and approaches? So there's a kind of table that looks in more detail at that. We also looked at cost and economic implications. And I'm not going to go through like, basically, I found one really fantastic peer-reviewed journal that looked at economic implications of roadway adaptations, and we go into a little bit of detail in the toolkit. When you're doing economic analysis, you're talking about like orders of magnitude, like is this going to cost 4 billion or 100 or 400 billion? So you're talking really big numbers. But I would say the primary takeaways were that in order to contain costs, we definitely need to be proactive about adaptation. You don't want to have to wait for like a washout emergency repair. You want to be thinking ahead. We also need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, because that lower emission scenario is going to be a much easier situation to deal with versus a higher emission scenario. And then the building public awareness and making sure that we're actually kind of cultivating some political will for the investments that will need to be made in order to make our communities as resilient as possible and even thrive as our climate continues to evolve. And so with that in mind, we close out the toolkit. Before you get to all of Zach's amazing appendices, we talk about like, what are our implications for future planning? The vision is to really foster climate resilience, for our region, for the state of New Hampshire. We want to be thinking about both mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and adaptation strategies for our roadways and for other types of infrastructure. And think about what are the education, collaboration, the policy needs on that front. A couple things that come to mind specifically, we can make sure that we're bringing a resilience lens when we're doing regional transportation planning. So when we're looking at the MTP, the 10-year plan, the TIP, you know, how are we bringing resilience in when we're prioritizing projects, right? There's something called a resilience improvement plan that we'll be undertaking. And we've written that into our UPWP. Actually, there's a statewide resilience improvement plan that is happening as well. And I had a great call with Nick Alexander to understand what they're doing at DOT so that we can build upon that work and really emulate that and be compatible with it. But under the federal Protect program, once we have a resilience improvement plan in place, projects that are identified there become eligible for discretionary funds with a lower match rate. So there's kind of a carrot to completing one of these. And that's something we'll be doing over the next, 18 months, couple years. And then of course, climate action planning. This is kind of thinking about that mitigation side, like how are we reducing greenhouse gases, and something that's actively happening right now. The state of New Hampshire will be working on a climate action plan. And several of our communities in the SNHP region are actually part of the greater Boston catchment area. And we're working with MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or I think I got it right. They cover the greater Boston area. We're working with them on that climate action plan as well. So this is like, it's basically like there's a lot of funds right now to take advantage of at the federal level, and we're gonna kind of jump in and do everything we can to really support resiliency in our region. And so with that, some key ways to put the toolkit to use, use the data to identify vulnerable sites and corridors, look at the menu of strategies and think about what are the opportunities that are going to be most impactful in your community, convene local stakeholders, kind of build that collaboration and education component and get people talking about priorities. And we invite everybody to stay engaged with our regional climate planning initiatives because this is going to keep moving. That was a long one, but thank you for your time.
Just check out the chat.
Oh yeah, thank you. Oh, Becky had to leave.
Thank you. Hop off.
Okay. Any questions? Any ideas for like dissemination?
Oh, yeah. Questions out there? Thank you.
Looks pretty good.
Next, Bike-Ped counting season in review. Dave Hilton, transportation.
Yeah, and Adam will be also joining me on this presentation.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no problem.
Yeah, here we go. We see the symphony. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay. Just took a minute. All right, can everyone see that in full presentation mode?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Hi, my name is David Tilton. Along with my colleague Adam Lasney, we'll be presenting the Bike-Ped counting season review for 2023. So SNHPC began bicycle and pedestrian counting in 2017 with the purchase of a single eco-counter brand Bike-Ped counter. This was expanded in 2019 with the purchase of additional equipment, as we can see in the increase in number of locations counted between 2018 and 2019. We have, since 2019, we have averaged 31 locations counted per year. And we draw this from a master list of 64 locations, where 24 of those locations are sidewalk counts and the remaining 40 are trail counts. We have currently 4 bicycle and pedestrian counters, 2 eco counters. These are our portable counters. These are the counters that we will bring to a site, we'll leave there for 3 weeks, download the data, and then at the end of the 3-week time period, we move those to another predetermined site and the cycle repeats itself. We have 2 traffic counters. These are our permanent counters. At the beginning of the calendar year, they'll be mounted to a fixed location along a trail or sidewalk and then left there for the calendar year. Every 3 weeks, staff will go out and download the data, but the counters will not be moved until the following year. Currently, in 2023, the location of our 2 permanent counters are on the Londonderry Rail Trail near the Sanborn Road parking area and the Wyndham Rail Trail on Depot Street. And here are the 2023 locations plotted on a map. In the center, you'll see the orange points. Those represent our sidewalk counts clustered in the Manchester area this year. You can see the specific location of those points on the insert on the left-hand side of the screen. The blue points throughout the region are our trail counts. And if you look to the southeast of Manchester, you'll see these 2 purple circles with the star in the middle. Those represent the Londonderry and Wyndham permanent count locations for 2023. So a couple of years ago, a commissioner, requested that we count the Manchester trails to get a baseline of data and see trail usage change over time. So in the spring of 2022, 3 counters were placed on the Piscataquag and the Rockingham trails. 2 counters were placed on the South Manchester Trail. The data was collected and was compiled into a report that can be found on the SNHPC bicycle and pedestrian counting webpage of our website. And then in 2023, the process was repeated again with the same locations, and special consideration was put to making sure that we put out the counters at the same time as we did the year previous to make sure that we had an accurate year-to-year data comparison. As you can see, we have shown an uptick in the Rockingham and South Manchester Trail with lack of a downgrade in usage on the Piscataquag Trail. We're not exactly sure why that is for the Piscataquag lost trail users, but it should be noted that the Heritage Trail here on the east side of the river was closed between December 2022 through the first half of April 2023. We put out the count after the trail reopened at the end of April 2023 and left it out to the beginning of May, but we may have been too early to capture the trail going back to 2022 usage. And now Adam will present some of the data that we collected during the 2023 season.
All right, so let's start with some sidewalk data in Manchester. Four bars you see covered down here, but blue is 2020, orange is 21, red is 22, and green is 23. So this is pre-COVID. You can see the volumes: Elm Street at City Hall, Hanover at the Chamber of Commerce, and then Granite and Commercial. Obviously, there was a huge decline in the COVID year. It started climbing back a tiny bit in 21, more so on Hanover Street. In 22. And then in 2023, we saw larger gains getting back toward pre-COVID volumes. Granted, in Commercial, we had a data failure, hence why there's no 2022 volume. But both on Elm Street and Hanover, volumes are back to about 70% of the pre-COVID numbers. And then Granted, and Commercial were around 50%. So another way we use our counters is to count a single day event. In this case, we've been counting at the Cruising Downtown car show on Elm Street since 2017. 2019, we had wonky data, so that's not in here. And then the show was canceled in both 2020 and 2021. But comparing here, we have 17 and 18, and then 22, 23. We're seeing consistent numbers and some rising numbers over the last 2 years. So from 2017 to 23, we've seen numbers about 12% higher at the car show. And here you can see the location of the counter. This is Veterans Park right here. And we're looking south down Elm Street. So some sample trail data here. I chose the Hooksett Riverwalk and the New Boston Rail Trail as examples. Hooksett, I'll say too, the counts are not, we don't have the same years for each count because of counter availability and whatnot. So here you see 2019, 22 and 23 for Hooksett, and then 21 through 23 for Boston. So from 2019 to 22, the Hooksett Riverwalk Trail was expanded. This photo down here I took, there was a ribbon cutting, I think two falls ago. The trail network has been expanded, hence the jump from 19 to 22, but we've pretty much flatlined for 23. New Boston, slight growth from 21 to 22, and then we're way down for 23. As most of you probably remember, we had a very rainy summer. This particular count was done in June, just a lot of rain, and I think it's as simple as that. That's my working theory on why it's declined. Most of the reading we're seeing even data or increasing, other than the rainy weeks we've had. So our long-term study, here's some results from Londonderry and Wyndham. So the blue lines, what we're seeing here, I have January, April, July, and October, one month from each season. The blue line you're seeing here is the Londonderry Rail Trail, and the black line is Wyndham. So some takeaways from these charts. Wyndham's rail trail has more users across the board, as you can see here. Obviously, the usage is much lower in the winter, goes up in April, and it goes up more so in Wyndham. Not really sure why that is. July, we have a huge morning peak, guessing it's people trying to beat the heat. But then it kind of just declines gradually throughout the rest of the day. And across the bottom here is midnight to midnight of the next day. I meant to say that at the beginning. And then October, kind of similar to April, slightly lower numbers. Wyndham has a morning peak and then it kind of declines, where Londonderry, there's both an AM and a PM peak. So it's the first time we've compared data from across a year at one site. So it was interesting to me to see this data. We can also slice and dice it different ways, but this I thought was kind of a good way to compare it. And then another way to compare, what I've done here is separated out Londonderry in this chart and Wyndham to the right. So within Londonderry, these are the patterns for the 4 seasons. January is in blue, April in green, July in red, and October in orange. And other than these big peaks, morning peaks in the summer and fall, it's pretty consistent trail usage throughout the day. Another thing you notice is simply a factor of how it's getting dark later in the day. Each season pushes back. People can be on the trail later into a day. Wyndham, as I said before, the numbers are higher in all 4 seasons. Patterns are a little bit different, where there's more of a morning peak in the spring, and it kind of is consistent throughout the afternoon, but not as much of a PM peak. Kind of just trails off. And I added this. So this is the most used sidewalks and trails we found in 2023. Orange is our color for sidewalks. This corresponds to our interactive map. And then blue are trails. Number 1 location, Elm Street at City Hall, shouldn't be a huge surprise to anyone. You can see the counter here, running all pedestrian traffic walking between City Hall and this pole. Hanover Street at the Chamber was our number 2 location, and it's on here twice because one was a summer count, one was a winter count. Wyndham Rail Trail at the Depot is our strongest trail performer, you could say. Derry Rail Trail at Bowers Road, another location in Wyndham at the Derry Town Line, which is just north of the depot. And then we have here's Londonderry, our permanent counter. I took the highest volume from the year, the summer. And then we have our Piscataqua and South Manchester trails, which were done in the spring. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back to Dave.
Thank you. So each year brings new challenges and unique experiences, and this year was no different. A year or so ago, we had one of our Bike-Ped counters stolen while being deployed in the field. So in order to combat that, we've attached a tracking device to either the backside or the interior when we can of the bicycle pedestrian counters. And here we have a screenshot of over the wireless network, it would show us location of the counter. So if the counter happened to wander off somewhere, theoretically, we could be able to locate it again using the wireless network in this map. Now, thankfully, we have not had to put that into practice yet, but it's nice to have that on there. And hopefully it also works as a bit of a deterrent if anyone is coming to check out the counter and, you know, up to some nefarious deeds. Another interesting thing that we came across this year was throughout the course of the early part of the mid part of the summer, we had some issues with two of our counters not collecting data properly. The counts would drop off suddenly for what looked like no apparent reason to us. When we went out to the field to collect them, we would find this is one of our portable data counters. These here are the holes that the infrared beams come out of. We would go to the field to download the data and move the counter, and we'd find these were packed with debris. The holes are very, very small, so we would clean them out as best we could. We'd move the counter to the next location, come back 3 weeks later, find this happening again. At first, we were under the impression that it might be vandalism, people not appreciating the counter on the trail or thinking it was something else and trying to block the infrared beam from counting. But we quite quickly deduced that that probably wasn't the case due to the fact that we were moving these to different locations each time. So eventually we brought the counter into the office, we opened it up, and we found that it was totally inundated with a colony of ants. At some point they moved in, they were bringing debris in, they did not like the openings on the side, and they were packing them in. So after a thorough cleaning and putting that particular counter out into a sidewalk location for 3 weeks, the situation resolved itself. We also saw this too with one of our permanent counters. This is a counter mounted on the Wyndham Rail Trail. As you can see, we have a lot of debris in the interior of this counter. This one we were on top of a lot quicker because whenever we go out to the field to download the data from this counter, we open the counter up. So we saw that debris was accumulating in there. So a couple rounds of compressed air and thorough cleaning seemed to resolve the issue there as well. It's talking to staff. This was not something that we encountered in years past. I'm not sure if it was just all the rain that brought the ants out of the ground, but this was certainly a unique situation that we encountered this year. And as 2023 is winding down, staff is looking forward to 2024 and looking for ways to improve the Bike-Ped counting program. And so to do this, we are looking to the future and where staff is being to discuss locations for 2024 Bike-Ped counts. And right now, the front runners for the two permanent locations are the South Manchester Rail Trail and the Derry Rail Trail. Another aspect that we're looking at is improving the data collection efforts. And we're looking at new innovative technology that is being developed. One of the things a number of companies are researching and developing a device that would be able to count and classify trail users and sidewalk users. This would be the same type of device that we use for our Leatron traffic counting classification system. It would use a camera and machine learning to identify, count, and classify different users of trails. So snowmobilers, people on horseback, bicyclists, pedestrians, skateboarders, rollerbladers. Theoretically, these could all be quantified into buckets and we would know who is using the trail and what mode of transportation they're using the trail on. This device is probably a couple of years off before becoming reality, but it is interesting to see the development of more robust and very granular data collection efforts on the bike and pedestrian front. And we're always looking to ways to expand our municipal input and taking new locations. And to do this, we've developed, and you've seen this before in previous presentations, a request account form. If you go to the SNHPC homepage, to the left of the news and notices box is 7 clickable banners. If you click on the How We Can Help banner, it will take you to this page here where you'll have a couple different options. Clicking on the Request a Bicycle Pedestrian Count link will take you to this Google form where municipal representatives could fill this out and request that bicycle and pedestrian data collection effort be conducted in a spot that we haven't done before. So if anyone likes to, has a location that they would like to submit, please go to our website and fill out the form and we'll be happy to look into it. And that is our presentation. Adam and I will be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I have a question, Dave, on the one, you see here?
Yep.
On the, where you talked about in the early part of the presentation, the one on the Piscataway, where you said there was some, differences that you didn't account for. Is that like footnoted right on the table, or is that someplace else?
No, it wasn't on the table itself. I don't believe we have. We're developing the graphic right now. So it is just a working theory at this point. Like I said, we're not sure if the weather played a factor into it, or it was just people slower coming to realizing that the trail was open, but that Heritage Trail is a vital link from the Piscataway to the downtown area. We placed importance on trying to keep the dates of the placements of the counts as closely as we did the year before. So we may have been just a little premature on the trail coming back to previous levels.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
It's just amazing how much an ant can carry. Oh my word.
They were packed.
It looks more like a much bigger like critter.
Yeah, well, that's why.
doing that.
I was waiting for him to say something.
Yeah, the holes were very small, so we kind of narrowed down what it could be, but I never expected ants. It was quite a surprise when I was downstairs, opened it up, and all the ants started coming out. In the amount of material that they got in there.
Wow.
And like I said, we're out there every 3 weeks, so it was less than 3 weeks from when we cleaned it out to when they would pack it again, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. They're industrious as the beavers, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, we lost a good amount. Like, I think 3 locations data were compromised. We had to throw it out. We got like 2 or 3 days and then the ants will be back at it again. So.
Wow. Amazing. Are you gonna try ant traps or something next year?
Well,
Or?
I think it was probably more the weather.
Yeah, that's when,
They couldn't live in the ground. So they were
Yes.
like, I gotta get out of here.
yeah, they were all going up because the water table was so high and the ground was so inundated.
Wow. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Under other business, update on fiscal year 2025 to 2034 10-year transportation plan.
Yeah, I'll give a few updates here on what's happening with the 10-year plan. I'm gonna open a website and share it. Let's see. All right, bear with me a second. Okay, hopefully folks can see. This is the New Hampshire DOT's 10-year plan website. I wanted to note a couple of things that have been posted just in the last couple of days on this website. When we last met, we were in the midst of the Gasset hearings, the 24 Gasset hearings around the state Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation. Those hearings concluded on October 25th in Goffstown. So in our region was the final hearing, that series of hearings around the state. If you go to New Hampshire DOT's 10-year plan website, or just go to Google and type in NHDOT 10-year plan, this will be the first link. They have posted a few things here under the heading November 23 Gasset meeting. This Gasset hearing comments summary book is very, very detailed information. If you want to know what happened at any of what was said or what was shared, either in verbally or in writing at any of the 24 Gasset hearings around the state, you can click on this. It's organized by council district. So if you're looking for us, you'd scroll down to Council District 4, and there's meeting notes and lists of attendees and a general, not transcript, but a general sense of what was shared at each meeting, along with the sign-in sheets for each meeting and the speaker cards and any subsequent written testimony that came in. So I'm not going to go in detail about what was discussed per se at the different Gasset meetings. If you want to learn about what was discussed in detail at any of our Gasset hearings or any of the other ones around the state, this document here called Gasset Hearing Comment Summary Book has everything you could possibly dream of and more. There is a spreadsheet that's here that's general themes and participation of Gasset hearings. This is a very, very, very boiled down set of themes and summaries from each of the hearings. You'll get a lot more detail in the other book that I just showed. And then for all of you who took the survey, the 10-year plan survey, there is now a report posted of the results of that survey. So what did people say? What were their comments and the like? I won't go in detail about that, but if you're interested in seeing the results of the survey, that is now posted as well on the DOT's 10-year plan website. What's not posted on the 10-year plan website yet is the results of the Gasset's deliberative session that was held last week. So after the public hearings, Gasset held or scheduled 2 meetings in November to deliberate and finalize and complete their version of the 10-year plan. The first of those meetings was held last week in council chambers at the State House. I was there. None of that information has been posted yet that I can find online, but I'll give you a general sense of what came out of that meeting, because some important decisions made that I think will be reflected in the final Gasset version of the 10-year plan. In our region, one of the key themes was exit 6 and 7, and the desire to make sure that exit 6 and 7 is completed in a timely fashion. The draft 10-year plan proposed delays in the beginning of those projects. Gasset had a discussion with DOT last week about issuing a $50 million turnpike bond, and that bond would help essentially the exit 6 and 7 project be completed theoretically within the 10-year plan cycle. I don't know exactly what date it would start, but it probably would be 2028 or 2029 start rather than 2032 to 2034. So I expect to see significant updates to the schedule of the exit 6 and 7 project in the 10-year plan based on that discussion that Gasset had last week. That was approved. The concept of issuing that turnpike bond was unanimously agreed upon by the Gasset members. All of the non-electric vehicle CMAQ projects in our region, and there were 4 of them, Manchester's Mammoth Road project, Bedford's Old Bedford Road sidewalk, Londonderry Phase 7 of the Londonderry Rail Trail, as well as the DOT's project to do signal optimization in Londonderry and Windham. Those were all approved, and in fact, all of the non-electric vehicle CMAQ applications around the state were approved except for one project in the town of Milford in Nashua's region, but all of the other ones were approved for inclusion in the 10-year plan, and we would expect the final draft version of Gasset's 10-year plan to include all of those. Beyond the non-EV CMAQ projects, if you recall, there were 19 electric vehicle related CMAQ projects. Gasset endorsed the inclusion of 15 of those 19 electric vehicle CMAQ projects in the draft 10-year plan. I do not know which of the 4 will not be included. I believe the 4 that will not be included are for eligibility reasons in particular programs. I don't have the full list, but based on the discussion, 15 of the 19 electric vehicle CMAQ projects will be ultimately included in the draft 10-year plan. The town of Bedford, if you recall from the Goffstown Gasset hearing, the town of Bedford has an emergent bridge project on Nashua Road over Riddle Brook that needs to be upsized to a bridge structure. It kind of fell in between. It's not currently a bridge structure, but based on resilience needs and the flow of Riddle Brook, it needs to be upsized and improved to a bridge structure, and kind of fell in between the cracks of whether it could be in the bridge program at the state level or not. The discussion was that it could be, the discussion at the Gasset level was that it could be included in the state bridge program with off-system federal bridge funding. So I do expect to see that Bedford project included in the final version of the draft 10-year plan. Councilor Gatsis raised some concerns in that discussion about the intersection of Route 3A and Manchester Community College. Councilor Gatsis has asked New Hampshire DOT to evaluate the installation of a traffic signal at that intersection and include such a project in the draft 10-year plan. DOT advised that they would look into that. I expect DOT will likely recommend a road safety audit or something along the lines to evaluate alternatives before concluding that a traffic signal is the right improvement at that intersection. But in any case, the intersection of Route 3A and Manchester Community College is on the radar screen, and we'll see what comes out of that discussion at the next GASSET meeting.
Isn't that going to be included in Route 7, exit 7?
Is it the current entrance or the one that would be there with exit?
I think it's the current entrance, 3A and Manchester Community College.
Okay.
Well, I know, but I thought that the exit 7 was going to kind of go down to that intersection.
There will be a new exit 7. There was some discussion, and it could be, Bruce, that this plays into it. There was some, not to get too far in the weeds, if you recall, the sequencing of the exit 6 and 7 project as long as I've been here, had exit 7 being constructed first and then exit 6. Councilor Gatsis asked DOT to consider constructing exit 6 before exit 7. It's unclear whether or not that's feasible logistically, but that's something that they're looking into. And so this all kind of plays into that sequencing as well. We don't have complete clarity on what's going to happen with that particular request about the community college intersection, but we will learn more at the next GASSET meeting on, I think it's November 29th. So stay tuned there. That was something that DOT said they would look into and advise on at the next meeting. There was a proposal based on the public comments to complete the Capital Corridor project development phase work. This is the work that was halted last year or earlier this year, I should say. I think it was the beginning of 2023. And that failed on a 4-1 vote. So the Capital Corridor project is still not moving forward at this point, based on a 4-1 council vote at the meeting last week. And then lastly, I would note that there was in each 10-year plan, there is a project put into the draft for public discussion and GASSET consideration for milepost-based exit numbering. And this is in response to a federal MUTCD requirement for milepost-based exit numbering. If anything is a political third rail in the world of transportation in New Hampshire, it is milepost-based exit numbering. And so not surprisingly, that project was rejected unanimously by the members of the council, and likely we won't hear of it again until it's reproposed 2 years from now in the draft 10-year plan for the same discussion.
That's the only thing they like to hate.
Well, I mean, it demonstrates to the Federal Highway Administration that New Hampshire has, put forward the project for consideration, and so I think there's a reason they put it forward each 2 years, because it is a federal requirement, and DOT could say, hey, we put it forward, and the councilors and the legislature rejected it. So and so that has happened again. So do not expect to see any milepost-based exit numbering project in the final draft version of the 10-year plan. So again, that's just my summary based on my own notes of being in the meeting of what has happened. None of this has been posted on the internet or anything yet, but some of these decisions have now been made last week and likely will be reflected in the final draft version of the 10-year plan. Lucy, is there anything that you'd like to mention on that front that I have not from the GASSET meeting?
One second here. Nate, I think you did a great summary of it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Those are pretty much most of the discussion there. And so I don't know when the notes will be posted or anything like that, so.
Okay,
But obviously between the meeting on the 8th and the 29th, there's, and other discussions and, tailoring the final version of the plan before it's, brought to the meeting on the 29th.
right.
Mhm.
So that's all I had for 10-year plan update. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items? I have a consensus to adjourn.
So consistent.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Somebody doesn't accept.
They don't let me. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Have a good day. Bye.
Too.